I would really end with that and leave the floor for questions to the panelists out here.
Hi, my question is to Mr. Hars. He has rightly spoken about the enterprises, entrepreneurs, and the sectors where government is least interested as of now. So what is your view about domestic consumption of services per se, vis-a-vis the consumption with export-oriented industries? So how do you see it in a conjunction, basically?
So that's a great question. Indian domestic services is so big. I'll just give you some numbers. Household services like housemaids, gardeners, drivers, etc. that we use, just the middle class and above, it's a 15,000 crore per year market. Now, if somebody were to come up with an exchange for household services, now in the US, such exchanges have started coming. Angie's List, Thumbtack, they are getting hugely valued, they are getting funded. There is no such exchange available in India. That's a 15,000 crore market. Then our household repair market, your TV, refrigerator, AC maintenance, that's a 10,000 crore market, pure services economy. You go on adding each and every services that we use in our life. India is a very large domestic services opportunity, very, very fragmented. Now, is there a play that one can create out of innovation to deliver superior value? What Uber did globally was also such services. It was taxis and cabs that you hired, but creating a superior value proposition through a marketplace for taxis and cabs, and that is getting valued at $17 billion today. Now, are there Uber's equivalent that we can create in various service sectors for domestic market? And that opportunity, just by domestic consumption size, is available.
There is a general feeling amongst a large number of Indians that China for us today is a benchmark and that we need to pick a large number of leaves out of China's book of economic development. At the same time, we must remember that India has certain distinct advantages over China. Firstly, we have the world's largest working democracy. Secondly, we have the world's youngest population. 70% of our population is under the age of 35. We have rule of law, independence of judiciary, and we have what Winston Churchill said, the unconquerable force and power of the English language. Keeping that in mind, I'm emboldened to ask this panel two questions. Firstly, how do we fare, or more appropriately, how well do we fare vis-a-vis China? And secondly, would the panel agree with the assessment of a large number of optimists that India, within a very short time, will overtake China in a spectacular manner?
I've actually worked in China and India, so I had 3-4 years in China, and I've worked here for 6 years. It's much easier doing business in China, and you have the support of the government in China, what you're trying to do. I'll give you an example. In the business, the local government built our factory. This is the beer business, making Bhardwaj beer. So what they did was that they paid the cost of the factory to be built. They obviously ensured that we had world-class infrastructure in terms of roads. And they built the factory in return for us providing employment for the local population. You see, China is, because they're not the world's largest democracy, the Chinese government is more myopic in terms of making sure that they're creating jobs for people and that they're creating prosperity for people, because if people aren't employed, gainfully employed, and earning money, they're going to start wanting to do other things like potentially overthrow them. So in return for providing a certain amount of employment, as well as committing to a certain amount of tax based on your sales projection, the government will go as far as building the factory. And then what happens was really interesting to see. In one particular province, the equivalent of the chief minister wrote to us and said, we want to come and meet with you. We notice that your projections next year for sales are X. We want to sit down with you and work out how we can help you hit your sales targets. Because if you hit your sales targets or even exceed them, that means you'll pay more tax, but also means you may employ more people. Now, I think it's highly unlikely that that would happen to me in India, that a chief minister would ring me up and, ask me how I'm going and, can he help me grow my business? We may have a slightly more cynical view of what that conversation would be. So I think that I think we're a long way behind China. I know people talk in infrastructure terms, 25, 50 years, whatever you want to say. But really where we're struggling in terms of China is that government is not business's friend. It's not recognizing that business does things like creates jobs, it pays tax, it does good things if you nurture it and create an environment where business can expand. And I say it again, you know, we live in a country that has more talented people than any other country in the world. You know, if we set them loose, the demographic that you described, you know, basically everyone being under the age of 25 or 20, is an advantage. You know, we talk about India's demographic advantage, but really, how do we harvest it? We don't. We don't create jobs. We have to create 10 million jobs a year in India as well, and we don't. We have to provide world-class education to our young people, and we don't. Our best and brightest leave and don't come back. You know, we're not doing what China does to keep people. Look at what China did in relation to its best and brightest. It funded them into the best business schools in the United States to the point that there's a significant population in the United States at the best colleges that come from China, funded by the Chinese government. We're not doing that in India. So until we do these things, you know, how are we expected to overtake China if that's what we want to do? I think the reality is that what we want to do is we want to get the 350 million people that live in dire poverty in this country up into a better standard of living so that they can afford to participate. We want the 600 million people that don't have access to a toilet to have access to a toilet because of all the positive things that creates in terms of health and women's safety. So there's lots of things that we need to do in order to start getting into the consideration set that we can be better than China. To answer your question, you know, will we one day overtake China? I don't know. I really don't know. I think what we see now and what we're doing now, probably the answer is no. Could we? Yes, because I think we have more talented people here, but we need to do something about it other than, you know, a lot of us talk about it at cocktail parties, but when it comes to the rubber hitting the road, nothing happens. And that's what we need to change here.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I only have an observation for the panel and answers Anoop's question as well. And that is actually what this country needs is an execution commission and not a planning commission. I think what we need to do is to audit every year or every 6 months all the plans, all the regulations, everything that keeps coming up. Are they actually happening? Because it's easy to make plans and easy to make laws, but it is extremely difficult to implement them. And everything we have spoken about in the earlier panel and in this panel is all about implementation. I think we've got more laws in this country than any other country in the world, but we do not implement. Until we implement, we're not going to get anywhere near China, let me assure you. So you had a very diplomatic answer. My answer would be no, not in our lifetimes are we going to overtake China unless we get our implementation and execution up to the mark.
You know, last parliament session in the last government did not work. You know, some just 20 days of working. That was a good thing. They were on a holiday, not too many laws were getting made.
Thank you very much. I would fully agree with Mr. Hirsch when he says that any department or any sector where the government is missing, they flourish. Really make a story. You know, for example, one great example that I'm getting in IT industry itself. Now, if you look up at when this sector, the telecom was open to private capital, private entrepreneurship, 80 crore people are talking to, 80 crore Indians are talking to everyone every day. It's not in a great story itself, it's a great story. I think that I would disagree totally with Mr. Jay. The fact of the matter is, the more you pass the legislation in Parliament or in the State Assembly, the more you actually disempower the people of India. The lesser the legislation, the lesser is the disempowerment. You empower bureaucracy by legislating. And the tragedy is that every legislation passed by Parliament or by the state legislature, their average life is more than 60 years. And some are 100 years old. The best is to put a cap or a sunset clause that you must revise after every 5 years. Times are changing, things are changing, technology is changing. The whole world is changing, and you want to really tie up the whole world with the old legislation. What's your viewpoint on this? And the second is, believe me, what Mr. Prime Minister said, the government has a responsibility to trust its citizen. And government permanent refrain in the world is distrust its own citizen. You don't trust businessmen. You don't trust anyone. The only element and component of trust is the bureaucracy. Why? You pass a legislation, leave it to the people to implement.
I think clearly the role of the government, right, is to have minimum interference with business. And I think we're all in agreement with that, okay? And in fact, my only point I was trying to make was some of the big reforms, right, that are required. Like, for example, the land policy, right, that needs to be changed. An act needs to be changed. Unfortunately, that will need to be approved, right, in Parliament. And that's just the way our process works. And that's why I was saying it's going to take a little longer. But I do agree with the other panelists in the point of view that sectors where the government would be least involved are going to be growing. I mean, I see that in my business as well. So I think we have alignment here.
Thank you very much. And thanks, audience, for being very patient. Thank you.